Welcome everybody to another episode of Pretty Well Read. I'm Mariah Moore, your host, and today I've got a wonderful guest with me. He has been a friend for quite some time, a fellow avid reader, fellow avid writer. Please welcome to the podcast for episode 3, Nick Bouchard. For those who are just joining for the first time, we are going to talk this week about Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation. So the first part here, we're going to talk to Nick about his habits as a reader and a little bit about his writing. Then we're going to jump into Annihilation non-spoilers. And the last section we're going to jump into will be spoilers at the very end. So you can drop off where you'd like or stick around for the entire thing if spoilers are no problem for you. But getting into it, Nick, the first question I ask everybody is, how do we meet?
We met, as many millennials do in this capitalist hellscape, at work. Yay!
We did. Yeah, we both worked at the same tech company. Myself on the sales team, Nick in content. When you were a full-time employee.
Yep. But in the ancient times of 20, when did you join? You joined in 2021 or 2020?
2021 in the fall.
Yeah.
Or in the summer in August. We're both big readers. I have some unique questions for you this time, but some follow the similar format. How and when did you get into reading?
That's a great question. I don't do a lot of remembering my childhood very well, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly where it was. But I think I've always kind of had books around in the house. You know, I don't know if my parents were really big readers. Like, I don't remember seeing them read a lot, but they always made books really available. I just remember having books around just kind of always. And then my relationship with reading changed and evolved a lot over time. But I remember around high school, like, I was reading Aragon back then. That was like, of maybe the big 3 or the big 4, like, high school boy book series, Aragon was mine. I never really read Harry Potter. I know Percy Jackson is another big one that a lot of people have read in that sort of age range. For me, was Aragon.
It's Christopher Paolini, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then even when I was, early years of college, I had a family friend, because I was a big Star Wars nerd at the time. I had a family friend who literally gave me, or lent me rather, one of the big Star Wars expanded universe novel series at the time, which was 20 books, in a garbage bag. So I had this garbage bag in my room full of books, and then every day when I took the bus, I took those books on the bus with me, and I just kind of chewed through them over a couple of weeks. And then, in early adulthood, mid-adulthood, I didn't read as much. And then as soon as public transit is a big vector for reading for me, I think, because as soon as I moved to Montreal, started working in tech, commuted on the metro every day, I started picking reading back up in a serious way.
Yeah, interesting. So you had books around in the home, so you were always kind of exposed to it. So it's safe to assume parents were reading, siblings were reading. It was just kind of like a monkey see, monkey do. This is what we do kind of environment.
Yeah, maybe less so the siblings, because I'm the oldest, right?
Oh, true.
So I'm the oldest of 3, so I was setting the example for the siblings. And I remember my dad would tell me stories before bed sometimes, and it would be stuff around King Arthur and similar myths, but he wouldn't be reading them. He would be telling me them from memory, from having read them somewhere else. So there's lots. Yeah. So I imagine, even though I didn't see him read that much, I would imagine that he read a lot. And I have books in my bookshelf that are his.
Cool. And so you kind of started off on the fantasy dragon train.
Yeah.
What do you like to read now?
I'll read pretty much anything these days, except I haven't read much romance, which I should probably fix. I should read one or two bangers in the genre. But most of what I read still sort of hovers around fantasy, sci-fi. I do love a good thriller. I read Gone Girl for the first time recently and just ripped through that.
Yeah, that's a series, right? Gillian Flynn's. How many are there?
Gone Girl? I don't.
Is it a series?
Well, I didn't know it was a series. If it is, I think there's just the one book, but I could be wrong.
I think maybe her books just look similar. Just kidding. But you ripped through the one book on its own.
Yeah, I ripped through the one book. Horror too is a big one. So sort of
Yeah.
fantasy, sci-fi, horror, the three big genres that I read. Thrillers comes afterward. Don't read a lot of like lit or contemporary fiction. I'm a
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
classics hound. I am one of those
Hmm.
guys who will tell you to read the classics.
Hmm.
Um, they're not always my favorite, but they're always like a good challenge. I think it's a good thing to challenge you with reading sometimes.
I
That's right.
also wanted to ask you specifically why you are beefing with magical realism. Why do you hate it?
Yeah,
The sigh.
I'm gonna blame 100 Years of Solitude for that.
I thought you
That's
hated it before that.
Yeah, but I mean that's the book that really kind of crystallized for me why I don't like magical realism. You got to pick a side. Are you writing contemporary fiction or are you writing fantasy? Like
Mm.
you got to pick one. I don't know. Maybe it's because it doesn't feel grounded to me, or like it just kind of goes off in many directions. Like I remember in 100 Years of Solitude at one point, is it like one of the grandmas just like flies away and you're just like, okay, bye grandma. you know and it's like that's not just, and it's a very subjective thing. I'm never, when it comes to reading, I'm never going to be the type of person to stand on a pulpit and be like, this genre is actually bad because XYZ.
Mhm.
It's just subjective. It's like, and there's a lot of trash that I read that other people will put like, arc an eyebrow at. um
Mhm.
100 Years of Solitude especially, I just remember reading and just being every page like, what
Yeah,
what
I wanted
what
to like it in my spirit. I wanted to like it because it's so
Yeah.
iconic, but I just couldn't bring myself to. So I kind of get it.
Yeah.
What are, if somebody who is just kind of like getting into fantasy, there are a lot of, I think they'll be surprised to find out there are a lot of kind of subgenres within
Mhm.
fantasy. Can you, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but can you kind of give us like a rundown of like some of the most notable subgenres in fantasy?
Yes,
What the
and
differences
you're not just putting me on the spot, you're putting me on a hit list, because whenever you try to discuss genres in fantasy especially, and you define them in a way that somebody else finds them a little bit different, like they'll come to your house and stab you. Like it's
are? Sorry,
um
my bad.
no
Rip.
worries. So like some big ones I can name, like epic fantasy is probably one of the most popular ones. So like Brandon Sanderson is kind of the go-to for a lot of epic fantasy, which is like outsized stakes. We're gonna go save the world. There's probably a dark lord in there somewhere,
Hmm.
and we're gonna get our team of plucky do-gooders. There's probably a chosen one among us, and we're gonna find out who the chosen one is,
Hmm.
and we're gonna go be heroic and save the world, and then we save the world and everything's good and everybody's happy. That's
Hmm.
in a nutshell epic fantasy. You
I eat it up
have
every time.
Yeah, you sure do. You have sword and sorcery is another one. So like think you're like Conan the Barbarian, Solomon Kane.
Hmm.
The vibe in sword and sorcery is different from epic fantasy, where in sword and sorcery it's a lot more like about a hero getting by with like wits and their own abilities. You don't really get a chosen one archetype in sword and sorcery usually. You get
Hmm.
there's often themes about darker aspects of civilization. So Conan the Barbarian, for example, people when they think of Conan, they think of Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie, right?
Yeah.
But one of the big themes in Conan that kind of gets lost in the adaptations is Conan is a barbarian who is, kind of put as a foil to civilization, and civilization is sort of shown as like this pit of like decadence and nihilism and hedonism. Portal fantasy is another one that kind of overlaps with epic fantasy at times, which is basically just like a person from our world gets thrown into usually a fantasy world. So Narnia is like the most popular
Oh.
example. So it's portal fantasy because they go through the wardrobe, they go into a fantasy world. What else? I mean, you could say there's cozy fantasy, which is
Oh.
like your Legends and Lattes type
Mhm.
stories.
I was gonna
Um,
ask you specifically about cozy fantasy. I feel like that one in particular has really kind of seen an upswing in
mhm.
popularity. Like, why do you think that is? And like, how do you feel about the genre?
I'm gonna say, in my completely uneducated opinion, it's
Hmm.
probably D&D,
Oh.
because as someone who has played D&D for a little over a decade now, I
Hmm.
kind of saw how D&D popped off with Stranger Things for the most part. and
Oh,
Critical
true.
Role as well. The vibe of D&D as a game has changed a lot in the past 10 years. And
Mm-hmm.
so you've gone from an era when D&D as a game was like kind of ping pong between sword and sorcery and epic fantasy, depending on the kind of table you're playing at.
Mm-hmm.
But at its core, it was like, you're playing these heroes who go and crawl through dungeons, kill things, gather treasure, and then go and kill a big bad guy. As the game kind of evolved, a lot of different groups started playing D&D. I say this in the least derogatory way possible, because a lot of these people are my friends, but theater kids started playing a lot
Yeah.
more D&D. And then the gameplay started to lean more into role playing versus the like going through dungeons and killing stuff. And I think that a lot of people who play D&D in that sort of era, D&D has become kind of their entry point to fantasy, and they
Mm.
sort of engage with fantasy through a lens of being a D&D player. And I
Right.
think that's lent itself to stories like Legends and Lattes. Fantasy genres has become a lot more accessible, and so
Yeah.
different aspects of it that were maybe less represented, because a lot of the authors are maybe not as interested in those areas. As the
Mhm.
readership changes, those kinds of genres have become more popular.
Are there any genres you won't touch that you're just not down with?
No,
Hell yeah.
like I'm the kind of reader who will white knuckle through a book rather than not finish it. Yeah, and I think because I'm both a reader and a writer, I'm not going to limit myself by saying that there's genres that I just absolutely won't read.
Hell yeah, I love that. That's a good segue into the next question about DNFing books. I've had two very stark answers, very
Mm-hmm.
different in the first two episodes. Janine in episode 1 saying, much like myself, she has DNF'd like 5 books ever. And my friend
Mm-hmm.
Elaine in the second episode saying that she DNFs all the time, baby. So
Yeah.
where are you on that spectrum?
I almost never do not finish, like I almost always finish books.
Yeah.
I think the only times in recent memory that I've not finished books has been like books that I'm reading for like professional development,
Hmm.
and I just kind of got swamped with other stuff, and so they've kind of fallen by the wayside. I white knuckle my way through a book even if I hate it. Again, I think it's because it's part of it is being a writer. I think there's something I can
Hmm.
get out of every book. Even the worst book ever will teach me something.
Hmm.
And I think for me, that's really what the difference is. I think if someone reads exclusively for pleasure, I don't think they should white knuckle their way through books, like,
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
Unless they're looking to like challenge themselves with a classic or something,
Mm.
because there are benefits to reading hard books as a reader that I think increase your enjoyment of, like, say, quote unquote easier books. But I think if you're a writer, I would say white knuckle your way through it, read
Hmm.
something light that you'll enjoy afterwards if you need to, as like a little reward.
Hmm.
But like, Ulysses is probably the hardest book I've read up to this point.
Hmm.
And it's notoriously difficult.
Yeah.
And even though it was like the whitest of white knuckling at times, I don't regret reading it. I'm glad that I finished it.
Yeah, exactly. Now you get to flex on us.
Exactly.
Um,
That's the best part.
yeah, I wanted to talk to you specifically though about how you track your reading and how you goal set, because you kind of like goal set within your broader goals. Tell us about the
Yes.
hierarchy of goals.
All right, I'm gonna open this in my other screen. I track the books I read and the books I own in basically a spreadsheet. I use Notion, but it's basically a spreadsheet. And yeah, so like this spreadsheet has like all the books that I own in one view. It has all the books that I want to read, like my TBR list, in one view. It lists borrowed books too, so I'm never that guy who borrows a book from somebody for 10 years and never gives it back. As far as my reading goal goes, I love, and I think people should like actively seek these out, but I love like suggested reading lists.
Hmm.
So like NPR, for example, has a list of like the best fantasy and sci-fi.
Yeah.
So I find it's a good way to, if you're curious about a specific genre or like a specific type of book, like it's a great way to kind of, like needle in your reading.
Hmm.
So one of my sub goals and my broader reading goal for the year is to like hit a certain minimum of books from these reading lists. I also give myself some space for like comic books, graphic novels. I love graphic novels. I've always read graphic novels. One of my favorite books of all time is The Dark Knight Returns, which is a graphic novel. I have a sub goal for like professional development book, poetry. I try to read a little bit of poetry just because
Oh
that's been
yeah.
a blind spot of mine for a long time.
Yep.
And So I'm trying to sort of dip my toe into that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
French books, because French is
Mm-hmm.
my first language, and yet I almost read nothing in French. So I try to do at least a couple books in French throughout the year. RPGs as well, because I've played D&D weekly for 5+ years. I recently added this year indie books
Oh, cool.
to my sub goals,
Mm-hmm.
just because I've started kind of exploring the indie author community where I live, and then
Yeah.
after that I have like wild cards, which is just anything that doesn't fit in those sub goals.
In terms of like pace, how many
Yeah.
books do you read per week or year or month?
Uh, per week there's a lot of variance, so it's hard to
Yeah.
average out. Per year, I've been a little bit over 50 books a year for the past like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I'm with you, similar paces. Kind of changing gears before we get into Annihilation, to writing. You
Yep.
are a writer by profession and
Yep.
also like a self-published author and working on books currently. When did you get into writing? How did you know you wanted to be a writer? Give us the backstory.
Yeah. So, I mean, the funny thing about getting into writing is almost everybody in my life was telling me I was a good writer, I should be a writer.
Mhm.
And then I ignored everybody for a long time. And
You sure
then
did.
in like 2016, I was like, huh, maybe I should be a writer. To like the collective face palms of everybody who knew me.
Mhm.
Career wise, as far as like professional, like writing as a professional, like content writer, marketing writer, yeah, that started in 2016 when I was in this period of fresh out of university, underemployed, knowing my degree is not going to lead me anywhere, and trying a bunch of stuff to figure out something I could do.
Yeah.
And writing was the one that had like the right mix of potential, and I already had sort of an ability for, like I was starting with a leg up instead of starting from scratch. Yeah, and then I grinded my way through content mills and low paying work and everything until I landed my first full-time gig, and now I've been a freelance writer for almost as long.
Which is
Yeah.
crazy. And in terms of writing novels, where did that start?
Yeah. Yeah. So novels started around the same time. I knew I wanted to write books around that same time, and writing professionally for a living was kind of going to be how I supported myself as I tried to make my dream of writing fiction full time happen. I started writing fiction in high school where I was writing fan fiction. Interestingly, it came as like a vector of being a recluse and having no friends in high school, and finding like online communities of people who wrote fan fiction, for fun, and
Mm.
building friendships with some of those writers, and doing that like every day after school.
Yeah. Mhm.
And that's kind of where that started. And then I wrote fan fiction on my own too. I still have those of like 3 or 4 stories on fanfiction.net that I wrote when I was in high school.
.net. Oh my god.
Hell yeah. And yeah, and then I started writing screenplays, because I had friends where in my hometown that were into film, and we wanted to do different film projects, and I wrote the
Mhm.
screenplays for those. And then I transitioned from screenplays to novels, mostly because with a screenplay, to kind of get anywhere, you have to get a lot of like rubber stamps for a bunch of different people. Like a screenplay doesn't go anywhere unless somebody produces it into a film.
Yeah, true.
And I wanted to write and finish projects without having to convince a bunch of people to do these projects. So
Right.
I went into novels, and so I've been writing novels for almost 10 years now.
You have one published, we'll get into
Yeah.
that, but how many have you written prior to Face Conscripts?
Oh my god.
He,
Okay.
for audio listeners, he's rubbing his eyes and face in in regret.
There's Fate's Conscripts. The one I've published is either my fourth or my fifth,
Yeah,
and I
that's what I was gonna
think
guess.
right now I'm writing my sixth.
Wild. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people from the outside think it's like a one and done like process. Like
Mm-hmm.
every one book gets one book equals one publish.
And what I like to say to those people is, even Stephen King, who's written published 15,000 novels, one of the stories that he tells in On Writing is how when he started writing short stories, he had like a spike in his wall, and he would like put rejection slips, back in the day when they weren't emails, rejection
Mhm.
slips on that spike until I'm pretty sure the spike fell off. And this is like a well-known anecdote at this point, but even
Mhm.
Carrie, the first published novel that he wrote, was in the trash. Like he threw it out, and it was his wife who fished it out of the trash and told him to keep writing it. As a young or just starting, or writer who's just starting out, you kind of
Mm-hmm.
need that hubris of like, the first novel I write is going to be the best novel ever and it's going to get published, to kind
Mm-hmm.
of get you to the end. And
Mm-hmm.
then you kind of have the sobering realization of like, this novel's not actually as good as I thought it was, and I
Mm-hmm.
have to write at least a couple more to get to something that I can actually, work with.
Right. Yeah. No, that balance of like being delusional enough to at least get it done, but
Mm-hmm.
like being humble enough to know that it's probably more likely that it's just a starting point for
Yeah.
you is what you're aiming for. Tell us about Fate's Conscripts. What's it about? How'd you come up
Yeah.
with it?
So, Fate's Conscripts, if I could describe it in just a couple sentences, Guy gets told that he's the chosen one by a guy whose character can best be described as, what if Gandalf was a narcissistic asshole? And he sort of goes on this chosen one quest that gets flipped on its head in a way I won't tell because it's a spoiler. I think the idea for it was essentially, what if I write a story where I take this chosen one trope and like flip it on its head?
Hmm.
But the world where this book happens is connected to the world of the first novel I ever wrote.
One of the things, like having, written my first draft of my first novel, that I kind of keep in mind, that other writers should keep in mind is, to be a great writer, I think you also have to be an avid reader. What
Mm-hmm.
would you say about like why reading is so important for writers?
I think, okay, maybe the way I would describe it is like, imagine that your goal in life, you're like, I want to build engines. That's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you never pop the hood on any of the cars you drive.
Yeah, great
And
analogy.
all that you do to learn how to build engines is like go on YouTube and look up videos about how to build engines or read books about how to build engines. It's like, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
But you also need to familiarize yourself with how engines work in real world conditions, and
Mm-hmm.
what does a BMW engine look like? What are the things that they do when they put an engine in there that makes it a BMW engine versus like a Honda? And I know nothing about engines, so now there's at least someone watching this who's like, haha, what a moron. But yeah, and I think with reading, there's a judgmental side of my brain that's like, if you don't like reading, why are you writing books?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like, on the one hand, reading is essential to understanding how story works, how prose works,
Mm-hmm.
um, figuring out like, what do you appreciate about certain genres versus genres that you don't appreciate as much.
Mm-hmm.
But it really boils down to like, if you're not reading books, why are you writing them?
I think when it comes down to it, if you don't appreciate the art that you're doing as like a broader art, you're never gonna like fine tune your craft yourself, you know?
Yeah, it's like a painter who never looks at a painting. And
Yeah.
you can make you can make the argument there are some great painters who aren't like, they're not traditionally trained, or they don't have a long relationship with the canon of, painting. Like, you don't necessarily need to study impressionism and like the romantic painters and everything to be a great painter.
Mhm.
But at the same time, with painting, you're looking at stuff all the time, right? And
Mhm.
that's all that stuff that you look at, if, like through the alchemy of creativity, leads to a painting somewhere.
Right.
And if you're a writer, that's what reading is.
Well, with that, we will segue into Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation. So if you'd like to hear about that, stick around for section 2, which will be non-spoiler discussion. Cue. Editing Mariah here. I forgot to read the back of the book. What a rookie mistake. I'm going to read it for you now. If you haven't checked out Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation, this is the summary on the back of the book. Area X has been cut off from the rest of the world for decades. Nature has reclaimed the last vestiges of human civilization. The first expedition returned with reports of a pristine Edenic landscape. The second expedition ended in mass suicide. The third in a hail of gunfire, and its members turned on one another. The members of the 11th expedition returned as shadows of their former selves, and within weeks, all died of cancer. In Annihilation, the first volume of Jeff Vandermeer's Southern Reach trilogy, we joined the 12th expedition. This group is made up of 4 women: an anthropologist, a surveyor, a psychologist, and the de facto leader, our narrator, a biologist. Their mission is to map the terrain, record all observations of their surroundings and of one another, and above all, avoid being contaminated by Area X. They arrive expecting the unexpected, and Area X delivers. But it's the surprises that came across the border with them and the secrets the expedition members are keeping from one another that change everything. There you go. Back to the podcast.
Wow, beautiful music.
I know, thank you. So getting into section 2 here, just starting out with, like, how did you hear about Annihilation?
I saw the movie. That's how I heard about Annihilation. Yeah.
Really? Oh, I thought, I'm kind of bummed. I was hoping you saw
Yeah.
it, like, beautifully displayed at a store and it piqued your interest.
Nope. I saw the movie, I think, when it came out in theaters,
Mm-hmm.
and I never gave the book a thought
Mm-hmm.
until I saw it at a thrift store. I saw the 3 volume like collected edition at a thrift
Mm-hmm.
store, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that movie was pretty good." And then I bought it,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it took a year before I read it.
Yeah, that's so funny. And it's like, you know, would you call it one of your faves now?
Yes, 100%. Vandermeer is one of my favorite authors, and if I'm gonna squish the whole series as like one of my favorite,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think I can pick a favorite book in the series.
Oh, really interesting. I
Yeah,
feel like usually people are pretty definitively like, nothing beats the first one or nothing beats the last one, but you really can't.
I have opinions on that, which we'll get into later.
Okay, perfect. Um, I also wanted to ask about, speaking of the movie versus the book, a
Yeah,
lot of people call the movie a horror, but I wouldn't classify the book as a horror at all. But what would you call the genre of the book?
yeah, and I think that's a really important distinction, and I think you're right in that. I definitely think there are some horror elements in the book. There's
Hmm.
elements of body horror. There's elements of like the what I would call like social horror, like the paranoia you get from
Hmm.
from stories like The Thing, one of my favorite
Hmm.
movies of all time. There are definitely some horror elements, but I think it's definitely secondary to even calling it sci-fi is kind of off. Like it's because one of the source of the fantasy element or
Hmm.
the speculative element of the story is in the environment
Yeah.
and what causes the environment, which isn't in the first book, which
Hmm.
isn't Annihilation. Sci-fi, I think, is the closest
Yeah.
thing, even though it's not about technology,
Right.
but there are some elements of horror in there for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I would say that there are some scary elements, spooky elements, but it's, if we're gonna like pigeonhole it, it's sci-fi more than anything for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
if you're at the bookstore and you have to pick a shelf for it, sci-fi is where it's gonna go.
yeah, I think that is where it's shelved, which makes sense. What did you think about Vandermeer's writing style, and like what did you like about it?
So what's interesting is I was carrying the book around while I was reading it, and when I met up with a friend, and she was a big fan of the book, and she told me
Hmm.
one of the things she loves is Vandermeer's like economy of style, in the sense that it's not like the most long-winded prose. And I think to go like a level deeper on that, I think what I love the most about Vandermeer's writing is the his ability to make the unknown known
Hmm.
through like a few words. One of the I often when I'm describing it to people, I often say it's Lovecraftian, but to call it Lovecraftian is to almost do an insult to the book, because one of my favorite things about it is, one of Lovecraft's crutches in his writing is to call things indescribable, like it's an indescribable horror
Hmm.
or whatever. But
Hmm.
Vandermeer describes everything, and he
Hmm.
describes especially like inner sensations that are alien and unfathomable to
Yeah.
you, and like your day-to-day life of not confronting an eldritch horror.
Hmm.
um he describes all of it, and he finds ways to describe all of it, and I think that's one
Yeah.
of the big strengths of his writing, one of the things I really enjoy.
Yeah, interesting. I find that's a good way to put it. He does describe everything, but kind of going on in with my favorite element of his writing style is, I feel like it's the perfect amount of blindfold.
Mm,
Like, you know, just enough to like, you know, be in the know about things and understand what's happening, and you can appreciate it in like a lyrical sense a bit, but
Hmm.
you're not in the dark where you're like, well, I don't know. Like you're still
Yeah.
invested enough to want to keep going. It's like a really great amount of blindfold, very beautifully done and
Yeah.
balanced. Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. I like the imagery of the blindfold.
Yeah,
It's
how
like a
translucent is it?
yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was imagining. How getting into the setting of Area X, how did you
Hmm.
feel about it?
I think one of my favorite things about the setting
Mhm.
is how lush and full of
Yeah.
life it is.
Mhm.
And I think one of the reasons for that is that it works so well is because I don't know if he still has it on his website, but he had it on his website for a while. Vandermeer has like a patch of wild grass in his like backyard. Like there's an area of
Mhm.
his yard that he deliberately kept wild as a
Mhm.
way to like attract different species of like insects and birds and whatever else. And there's so many instances in Annihilation where he's describing the environment, describing species, and describing, the way nature has kind of taken this area back over,
Mhm.
that you know for a fact have been distilled from his experience, like sitting by this wild area in his yard and just like watching and just paying
Yeah.
attention. If I can compare that to something in my own life, like there was a time where I was sitting in the woods and I was eating breakfast and it was quiet, quiet, quiet. There was
Mhm.
nothing going on. And then I hear this sound, like this sound. I'm like, oh, what the hell? It sounded loud. It sounded really loud. And I
Yeah.
look around and there's a crow flying overhead. And I was
Mhm.
hearing the beat of its wings. And it was
Oh, cool.
like deafening because there was no other sound.
Mhm.
And in the same way that experience, I could translate into if I was writing a story about like, the beating of a bird's wings. I think
Mhm.
his obvious love of nature and the environment and his like experience of having this piece of nature in his yard that he could watch, I think feeds a lot of what he writes
Mhm.
about the environment. And that's, I think, one of the things I love the most about Area X is how lush it is.
Yeah, I agree. I think like tacking on to the sound piece, I don't remember the last time I felt so immersed in a
Mm,
story like sound wise. Like I really
mm-hmm.
felt like I could hear what he was describing. I feel like obviously like sight is a given and sometimes smell if a book is kind of quirky, but the sound I was like, "Oh my," like the moaning in the distance in the marsh.
And
I was like, "Oh my God, ominous."
and there's one particular passage which we'll talk about in the spoiler section
Mhm.
where this combination of all the senses really comes into play
Mhm.
in describing this one passage and really makes it a lot more powerful.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad we're going to circle back to it. Speaking about Area X, this is the section where we're going to watch a little clip.
Hey,
Yay! Okay.
I've always been writing about climate change. It shocks me sometimes that there are articles that act like this is something new, because I remember in the late 80s and early 90s writing a series of stories in a novel that were set in a desert-like Earth that was the result of climate change. Having been kind of a nomad before I came to Florida, finally having a place where over
of
20,
course he's from
25 years I
Florida.
settled in, and I knew the environment, I knew the hiking trails. All of that went into Annihilation in a way that was different from my other work. The setting of Annihilation is the hiking trail I do out at St. Mark's with uncanny elements thrown in. The Gulf oil spill was a pivotal part of coming up with Area X, because while it was going on, we really didn't know if it would ever end. Some experts were saying there might be oil still spilling 20 years from now, and so it was a constant spillage in your head. There was a constant drip in your head, and I think that came out in this desire of my subconscious to protect the areas that I loved, and more or less did that by putting an invisible border around them and returning them to a pristine state of nature. I'm not a fan of fiction that's totally hopeless I try to write books that are balanced, and I try to look at this issue in ways where there are absurdist, dark glints of humor. Even ER nurses joke a little bit, at least, just to relieve the stress. You find ways of documenting the world as it is and the beauty that's in the world, and you wind up redefining utopia and dystopia. We can't live the way we live now, but there are ways in which we can live in a useful and interesting and comforting and satisfying way within what's happening. Climate change deniers are a cult. You're unlikely to convince that person, but what I'm more interested in is the person who says they believe in climate change, but they put it out of their minds. They think it's coming 40 or 50 years down the road when we're actually in the middle of it now. And those are the people that I'm hopeful that the books will move to do things in their local communities, to do things on a more macro level as well, to push us out of our complacency. And I include myself in that.
2 questions following the clip.
Yeah.
Have you considered climate change as a theme of the book, and how much do world events influence your writing?
So question 1, it's kind of shocking that I didn't even think of climate change as a theme.
I didn't either.
And I think for me, maybe it's because I've read the whole series, and I feel like as I've read later in the series, to me, it gets more and more dystopian. It's funny because when he was talking about it, he says that one of the things that motivated him to write the story is like putting an invisible barrier around this area of nature and letting nature reclaim it. But to me, as he's talking about the Gulf oil spill as an inspiration, I'm like, oh, Area X is the oil spilling out over the area and like transforming nature and everything. But that's not what he meant at all. In the creative act, Rick Rubin talks about how, as an artist, when you make something, your intended interpretation becomes meaningless as soon as it's released. And then the interpretation of anyone who engages with it is just as valid as your intended message. And I think that's an example of it. Is, he was deeply motivated by climate change as he's writing this story. But as both of us apparently are reading it, we're not even thinking about climate change. And in fact, for me, listening to that clip, until he was talking more about climate change, I took the opposite message than what he intended.
Yeah. You think you can kind of suss out an author's intentions when it comes to building the book, but sometimes you can just really be way off. I'm glad to know that you didn't pick up on that either. I was
I focus, and maybe that's a sociology major in me, but I focus a lot more on the human themes. A lot of the themes that I picked up are more about the people, both between themselves and in relation to Area X. For your second question, I'm trying to think. Very seldom, I think, do real world events kind of affect what I write. There was one book I wrote, the second book I wrote, where I wrote that in 2017 or 2018, and it's set in the Donbass back when Russia had just kind of invaded the Donbass and Crimea and hadn't gone full fucking let's take all of Ukraine. But it was more as a setting for like Black Ops stuff. It was like, where would a like a fledgling Black Ops unit be deployed to do weird stuff? Probably in like the Donbass and the Crimea is a place where things are kind of fucked and weird, and there's not maybe a lot of scrutiny on there. Not in the way there is now, I think. For me, my writing is a lot more inspired by my own life experiences, my own life events, and my psyche and the psyche of people around me than world events.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I feel like when you're really in the weeds with like something like fantasy, hard fantasy, for lack of a better term, I don't know. Like there's not like a ton that can like directly influence it from like a world stage perspective. But
you would be surprised, because a lot of the themes in The Lord of the Rings come from Tolkien's experiences in World War One.
I was gonna say, aside from war, but yes, that makes sense.
I mean, war is a big one, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff you could do. Like I have one idea for a book that's basically like a fantasy book that's basically around AI.
Oh yeah, interesting. That'll be
so like it can get in there. It's just you have to twist it, you have to change it, and all that stuff.
Is your favorite passage of the book a spoiler?
It sure fucking is.
Okay,
it sure is. Let me see if I can think of one that I really enjoy that's sort of non spoiler esque. I think the non-spoiler one that I can think of that I really enjoy is when the biologist, like, we flash back to when she was a kid and there was a pool outside of her home, and she
Hmm.
describes how this overgrown pool became like this hotbed for different species to come in, like that there were tadpoles, there were birds, and whatever else.
Hmm.
And I think that passage, because it's, a flashback to like what was a formative experience for who that character became, the
Hmm.
way it's described, and also sort of the way that it's sort of it kind of also talks about what's going on at the fringes with her family life and everything else. I think that's one of my favorite passages in the
Yeah.
non-spoiler section.
Yeah, fair. Mine's also in the spoiler section, so stick around for that section, and we'll get into this, the passages we liked in more specifics.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about, so we follow four uh characters on an expedition into
Yep.
Area X, and none of them are named. So that
Yep.
we have a biologist, a surveyor, a psychologist, and an anthropologist on the 12th expedition into Area X. As far as we know as readers, they kind of just need to like follow the guidance and direction of the psychologist
Yep.
after undergoing months of training, and they're kind of in there to observe and learn from the area, and then
Yep.
take back their findings once they're done their expedition. What did you think about Vandermeer's choice of keeping the characters unnamed?
That's a good one. So fun fact, in the movie they all have names.
Oh, do they? Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
So they all have names in the movie. I think because, for me, one of the big themes, like some of the big themes in the story, are about what's true, what isn't true,
Hmm.
how much of your perception and your senses can you trust. Keeping the characters unnamed naturally creates a barrier between the four of them,
Hmm.
which contributes to what happens later in the story. And I
Yeah.
think I find that's a great choice to sort of right away build this barrier between the characters. And I think you
Hmm.
could probably argue that there's also a barrier between you as the reader and the biologist because of that,
Yeah.
which also plays into these themes, and also plays into, the fact that it's a first person story being retold after the fact
Hmm.
by a narrator that's dubiously reliable in places.
Hmm.
I think it also has that effect, but for me, I think the main impact is the barrier between the four characters.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think adding on to that, it really like dehumanizes them and really
Mm,
like kind of drives home the fact that they are kind of expendable, because it's
hmm.
known to us that not many people come back alive or die shortly after the expedition. That's
Yeah,
not a spoiler. That's pretty like pretty
early
upfront in
on.
the book, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah. But I think that not choosing not to give them names, it was really like, well, don't get attached, haha, or do, haha. We'll see.
yeah. I don't even remember if her husband has a name in the book.
No, it was just my husband. He was the
Yeah,
medic in his expedition, the
yeah,
expedition before, but just my husband.
yeah.
But in the movie, you mean?
No, in the movie he has a name.
Oh,
But I
for
think,
sure.
no, in the book you're right. I don't even the husband has a name, which,
No,
again, barriers,
fascinating. Yeah.
dehumanization.
Speaking of the movie, my next question was, how did the
Yeah.
movie compare to the book for you?
Okay.
Okay.
I enjoyed the movie a lot more when I hadn't read the book. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
I think the movie is a very pared down and simplified version of the story that you get in the book.
Mhm.
There's a lot of stuff that's missing that's in the book that is either not there at all or is kind of compressed with other elements.
Mhm.
There's one location in particular that sort of gets compressed with the lighthouse that isn't in the
Yep.
movie at all,
Oh,
which maybe
interesting.
is more of a spoiler section type thing.
Okay.
There's also some decisions in the movie. In the books, you start kind of, you're in Area X. You start right in there,
Yep.
and the characters' motivation at the beginning, is explicitly stated early in the book, is like her husband went in and came back out, and there was some weirdness around that, and she
Mhm.
goes in to sort of figure out what's going on.
Mhm.
In the movie, they really press in on the mystery of Area X, and you have to go and do this to figure out what happened to your husband, because there's a thing that happens to the husband in the book
Mm-hmm.
that like it already has happened when the book starts,
Oh.
that is happening in the movie at the beginning.
Oh,
And
okay.
so that
Interesting.
doesn't get resolved before the main story starts, and that becomes the motivation for
Yeah.
the biologist, who is Lena in the movie, to go into
Yeah.
Area X. So there's like, the stakes are very different and they're presented in a
Mm-hmm.
very different way. That's a lot more conducive to film.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Like in film, you have to like capture people's attention right away and like
Mm-hmm.
fucking throw them in and keep them in.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot more mystery around that. There's a lot more will she, like the first, I think the first 20 minutes of the movie, maybe a bit less, are like, is she going to go into Area X or not? Why is she going to go into Area X and all that,
Oh.
which in the book she's already in there when it starts.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like you said earlier, the vibe in the movie is a lot more horror
Mm-hmm.
than sci-fi.
Okay.
And there's one thing that they do in the film, which I understand why they did that way, because film is a visual medium. Whole of Area X and what Area X does in the movie is reduced to a shimmer and fractals. So a lot of the changes that happen in Area X
Mm-hmm.
are tied to this visual element, which is still
Oh.
present in the book, but is kind of is very secondary to other things.
Yeah.
It's one of those adaptations that I think as a reader of the book is harder to enjoy, because it's so different and it has to be
Yeah.
so different to work.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of people, like film people, praise the movie for doing something that's really hard to do in film, which is to take like the unknowable and the eldritch from like the Lovecraftian type stories and
Mm-hmm.
visualize it and put it in the visual medium of film. So in that
Right.
aspect, it really succeeds,
Yeah.
but it comes kind of at the cost of a lot of the themes, a lot of the elements of the book that I really enjoy.
Yeah, interesting. I was gonna ask if like the movie was kind of a lot more closed at the end, because in the
Yes.
first book of a series, like many first books of a series, there are a lot of loose ends to incentivize the reader to read on. But if they were gonna just do the one standalone movie, then it makes sense to kind of tie things up
Yeah, it,
nicely.
it might it might be good to, in the spoiler section, talk about a couple of those changes, because
Okay,
there's some really important ones that kind of speak to the vast differences between the two narratives.
interesting. Gotcha. And the last question here for the non-spoiler section of the book is: how did your experience change, if at all,
Mhm.
reading the book a second time?
Very different.
Oh
Very
yeah.
different.
Oh.
And I think it comes also from having read all four books before
Mm-hmm.
I reread the first one. There's a lot of, as I'm sure you've experienced in your first read of this, there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of unanswered questions when you get to the
Mm-hmm.
end. There's a lot of things you don't know, and if you take this story as a complete story, you have to be comfortable in your not knowing. A lot of those questions get answered later in the series. So
Mm-hmm.
having that information in my head as I'm reading through adds another layer to a lot of different things that happen in the first book.
Right.
I think also because I think when you read Annihilation, one of the big questions is like, what is going on? What does this all mean? What is happening?
Mm-hmm.
When you know the answers to those three questions, you can kind of focus more on the how. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I really enjoyed about this reread, is because I know all those answers, I can kind of
Right.
focus on how you get to those answers, or how in
Right.
some situations you don't get to those answers.
Yeah. The mechanics.
So I really enjoyed getting to read it a second time, because I feel like I could get into the weeds a whole
Mm-hmm.
lot more.
Yeah. It's kind of like a nothing gets past me kind of read
Yeah,
through.
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I love that. That makes sense. Okay, great. So we're gonna jump into the last section here: transition music. Oh my gosh. Okay, so if you're joining us still, if you're still here for the last section, we will obviously be spoiling major plot points and details in the book. So hang on. I wanted to start off with what we left in the last section: your favorite passage.
Yes, my favorite passage is the crawler,
Oh yeah.
when the biologist goes down into the tower and runs into the crawler. And I think,
Hmm.
A, because it's like this climax in the story,
Hmm.
but B, because it really I was saying in the previous section how one of my favorite things about Vandermeer is he makes the indescribable describable, like he actually describes it, and that's the crawler is like the epitome of that, to the point that the way it is handled in the movie, for example, I think for a movie is done very well, but you
Hmm.
lose a lot of the things that you get in the passage in the book, and part of it is because it's a different thing to the crawler, but it serves kind of the same narrative purpose.
Yeah.
But I think it's because that passage kind of brings together everything that the story does really well. And like, we're talking before about, you're talking about the senses and how Vandermeer uses a different sense to describe. And it's like the epitome of that is in this passage,
Yeah,
because there's
true.
literally a line where she says, like, how much can an optic nerve handle? And so she
Hmm.
literally, like, I think she closes her eyes or otherwise like blinds herself to like process what's happening with the other senses.
Yeah.
And there's like a description of like it sounds like ice breaking, and it
Hmm.
tastes like brine on fire. Like, it's
Yeah.
such a great passage. I think it's the best passage in the book.
Yeah, it is. That's good. I know. I love that one. I think I really liked when the biologist is talking to the psychologist who had just jumped from the lighthouse,
Mm-hmm.
and she says like annihilation,
Yeah,
annihilation, and then you find out that that's uh like a self-destruct kind
yeah,
of like safe word, which I had not expected that to like. I was like kind of wondering how he was going to integrate like the word annihilation into the story, and that's not how I
yeah,
expected him to do it. And I was like, that's really like clever. I
yeah,
think really speaks to, these people are kind of trained to not think of themselves and just think of the greater expedition, like it's not about them.
mm-hmm.
But the psychologist in her like dying need is like, no, just like take me out of this. And finally, you're like remembering herself at the end. I was like, good for you. You should be able to annihilate yourself after all you've done to like, serve the expedition. That was really interesting.
Yeah. There are things you learn about the psychologist in the later books
Oh, oh damn it.
that really enhance, I would say, that experience.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. It's a great passage. Just and like especially because the chapter right before that ends with like, I knew that boot. It was a psychologist, and you're
Yes.
like,
Oh my god,
ugh,
yes.
what?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, correct. Agree
Yeah, no,
100% version.
that passage is a great one too.
Yeah.
Everything around the lighthouse is great.
Yeah. I really like that whole dynamic. I like that he just kind of let the psychologist just give it to us. Like question answer, question answer, question answer. Like we didn't
Hmm.
have to do the whole like she slowly finds things out and pieces things together and it's like
Yeah,
strings on a map and it's like a crime case. It's just like nope, you're the pacing of that scene was really interesting and really like satisfying in the brain.
yeah, and I think maybe a part of it is because at that point those answers don't matter as much.
Yeah, true.
Like you realize that these answers are less important than sort of the broader thing going
Yeah.
on, and it kind of it touches on one of the things that I picked up on as a theme, or not necessarily as a theme, but as an element of the story that I think is really great. Is, there's a saying in writing that, the best protagonist is the one that's like the worst suited to the problem you put in front of them,
Right.
because then they struggle and they struggle and they struggle, and
Mhm.
the biologist is the worst person to send into Area X. And
Mhm.
I'm going to my notes here.
Well, there are a few times where she references like I think like my relationship with my husband is why they picked me. I think that
Hmm.
being an introvert really trained me for this. So why
So,
why do you think she's the worst person to go into Area X?
so the reason for that is there's a passage on page 115 where she's talking about the project she was doing at the pools.
Yes.
And I don't remember where the pools were, but it was like a grand project, and she went up there and she was like cataloging the species that were in the pool.
Hmm.
And there's a passage, I'm going to read this passage right now because I think it really exemplifies what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
And she says, I had gotten sidetracked like I always did because I melted into my surroundings, could not remain separate from, apart from, objectivity of foreign land to me. The reason why the biologist is the worst person sent to Area X is to survive Area X, you have to keep yourself separate from it. And what
Right.
happens extremely early in the book? She
Hmm.
goes up to the words on the wall and breathes in the fungus, and
Yeah.
Area X becomes part of her,
Yeah,
which
true.
changes her and leads to a lot of the conflict that happens later on.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I think she's the worst protagonist. She's the best protagonist because she's the worst person to put in Area X,
Mm.
because in all these different parts of her life, when it comes to the natural world, she always gets into it too much, and then when she gets into Area
Mm.
X, which is unnatural in its nature, she just becomes like prime for the slaughter for it,
Yeah.
and she just gets absorbed by it and gets taken in by it.
True. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I hadn't thought about, because do you think that that would be like an asset being like kind of too into it? Because like those are prime time observations, but it does make her like extra vulnerable to the
Yeah,
elements there.
and that depends on your interpretation of Area X, where, like, in
Yeah.
the clip with Vandermeer, he talks about how Area X is protecting nature. But if you
Hmm.
take a view of it, which is kind of what I took a view of it, that Area X is this dystopian space
Hmm.
that like absorbs and remolds and kills essentially
Hmm.
what's in it, then it's a lot more of a problem to be unable to keep yourself separate from everything around you.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Damn. Well, how do you think you would have fared in Area X had you been on the expedition?
I don't think I would have done very well.
No.
If I were to put myself in the boots of this expedition, I think I would have been like the surveyor. It's like there's a passage where it says, like, where the biologist talking about the surveyor, and she says essentially, if she had something to shoot, she probably would have felt a lot better. And I think
Hmm.
that's kind of where the linchpin would have been for me, is like, if there are things to fight, I probably would have done a lot better. Yeah, I think the surveyor is kind of the best through line of how I would have done in Area X. I think it's just like
Hmm.
grow paranoid and distrustful, and then just kind of get like stick in the mud, stuck at base
Hmm.
camp, where I'm like, I can't trust anybody, but I don't know what to do, so fuck it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna park it right here.
What about
I
you?
would have been insta dead. Like I
Insta.
am like I am very trusting of people. I am very vulnerable, vulnerable and gullible. I'm very gullible. I think that I would have been really easy to hypnotize. Like that psychologist would have been like, I didn't even say one of my special phrases that you got hypnotized. I am very like community oriented. I wouldn't want it to split up. Like I
Yeah.
would have been I'm so vulnerable to the elements. No, thank you. Wouldn't have lasted 2 seconds.
Yeah.
What were your speaking of the psychologist and her like hypnosis?
Yeah.
What were your like initial theories about her motives in general?
I have to think back to my first read.
Yeah, back in the day.
Yeah, back in the olden times. I think maybe because I'm inherently distrustful of authority, I was kind of
Hmm.
distrustful of the psychologist.
Hmm.
I think when the stuff with the anthropologist comes about, like,
Hmm.
I thought on my first read that she literally just fucking kicked her down the steps and killed her, when the truth is actually even more sinister than that, which I
Hmm.
find really interesting. You have to remember too that when I first read it, I'd seen the movie,
Oh, right. Yeah.
but in the movie, she's a lot less sinister.
Oh.
So there's no hypnosis in the movie.
Oh, what?
Yeah, there's no hypnosis. So in the movie, she's kind of weird and kind of like cold and detached, but
Hmm.
she's not like this authoritarian figure, this distrusted figure, or anything. Like, she doesn't
Mm.
exert that kind of control over the team. So it's very different.
Hmm.
So I wasn't ready at all for when I read the book, even if I'd seen the movie, I wasn't ready for her to be what she was and to turn out to be what she was.
Right. Interesting. So yeah, I also thought when the psychologist like was like when she said the psychologist left, I assumed that she killed her as well, and
Yeah.
then it turns out it was the crawler. But
Yeah.
I thought, and when the psychologist has like a limp or whatever, I was like, oh no, eventually our main character, the biologist, is gonna have to fight the psychologist, where there's gonna be like a fight scene. I was
Hmm.
so sure that that was the case, but I think that's exactly what Vandermeer wanted you to walk into and assume
Yeah,
that.
that's a good way to look at that. I think it's like a red herring, right?
So very gullible, very vulnerable.
Vulnerable.
I wanted to talk about scariest parts of the book. I think an underrated, like obviously there's some like gore and body horror elements to the
Yeah.
book. I think an underrated, like uncomfortable moment is the biologist realizing that she is immune to the hypnosis.
Hmm.
Like that's like very telling. It's a revealing part of the book, but also kind of horrifying because then she has this knowledge of, oh, she wants to, I'm supposed to be controlled. Like, what is going to happen to me now that I'm in the know? What I'm going to have to do and what choices am I going to have to make? That's
Yeah,
like underrated. Like that sense of doom of like, oh, this isn't working on me is like very scary. But
especially when you realize kind of the extent of the hypnosis, right?
mm-hmm.
Which climaxes with the annihilation trigger word that you talked about before. But like
Yeah.
even just the going into the tower and thinking it's all just stone when it's like this living, breathing organism,
Yes, with a heartbeat. Oh.
like the extent of the hypnosis, I think, and of your mind not
Mm-hmm.
being your own.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, one of the scariest parts was the dolphins with human eyes.
Yes, very scary.
When it becomes like clear that the people of Area X have somehow been like transmuted
Mm-hmm.
into everything that's around them, whether it's the animals or whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was pretty horrifying because, especially
Yeah.
having read the books, like all of the books, like there's
Mm-hmm.
Absolution is a prequel,
Mm-hmm.
so
Oh, is it?
you get to see Area X before it becomes Area X.
Oh, cool.
And so like having read all of that and like meeting some of the people there and whatever and seeing how it happens, and then
Mm-hmm.
you look at Area X and it's like the dolphins have human eyes and
Mm-hmm.
the moaning is like all like almost human and everything. Like that's what's horrifying to me. It's the body horror aspect of that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I did think when she saw the dolphin, because she recognized the eye, I was like, I bet that's her husband, which she
Mm-hmm.
kind of loops back to at the end. She's like, it could have been, but she never
Yeah,
definitively tells you whether or not it is. You probably know whether or not it is, having read the whole series.
you don't get a definitive answer to
No?
that. You get kind of
Okay,
like oh, maybe it's this,
sure.
and then characters
Interesting.
acting as though that is the truth, but it's clear that it's like
Yeah,
you know
interesting. How do you think the main character's arc would have changed if she weren't the biologist?
one of the big reasons why the story works as well as it does is because the
Mhm,
biologist is both unable to separate herself from the natural world and
mhm,
constantly separated from people around her.
mhm,
It's in her relationship with her husband. She talks about like
mhm,
hanging out with his friends and everything, her parents, and then the people on the expedition.
mhm,
So the fact that she's so removed from the human element of the story, but is so enmeshed, literally after a while,
mhm,
with the natural around her, makes her kind of the natural protagonist.
mhm,
I think you see how the arc changes by the other characters on the expedition. The surveyor, because the surveyor has like the military experience and everything, is like if you took an action hero and put them in Area X, you get the surveyor. If you put like a more reserved bookish character in, you get the anthropologist. And if you
mhm,
put a villain, essentially, you get the
mhm.
psychologist.
Right. I think, yeah, that's a good point. I think too, like, I was talking about this with my boyfriend, like, to act, because he also read it, like, tactically, her being the biologist and her being able to determine, like, these are human cells versus these are not human cells in the samples they collect from the
Yeah.
various people and creatures and stuff. Like that probably wouldn't have been revealed to us had she had been the surveyor or the linguist or something.
Yes, yeah, that's a very good point, and and that's definitely an important element because a lot of the reveals you get are that right where it's like she's looking under a
Mhm,
microscope and it's like
mhm,
these
mhm.
are human cells, these aren't human cells, or there's a sample from the crawler, it's like this is brain matter, and
Right?
then one of
Yeah.
the big ones that I really like is when she realizes that the spores or her brightness are
Mhm,
affecting the way she sees the samples. So she
mhm.
knows that they're different from how she's observing them, and she knows this thing is messing with her senses. Again,
Yeah.
wouldn't have been possible she wasn't a biologist. I think that's a very good point. I haven't even thought of that, but it's very good.
I want to talk a bit about the relationship between like the biologist and her husband.
Yeah.
I thought it was super interesting because obviously, like, they're not the most perfect pair in the world. Like,
hmm It's a
personality
very
wise,
diplomatic way of putting it.
it is personality wise, they're very different, and I know opposites can attract, but like the scenes where he calls her ghost bird because she's not very present in his life, I think is like sweet and funny, but also kind of like resentful. Like, how did, like, obviously
hmm
he resents her for not being more of an active participant in his life. And so I don't think they're the most perfect couple in the world. So like having him write his journal entries to her and having him be like, "Would you follow me?" Like if you had to follow me, and her being motivated to follow him. I'm a little like, why do you want her to follow you and why do you want to follow him? You're clearly not each other's person ultimately. I thought that was really interesting.
Well, I think she is his person. I don't think he's her person. To me, I think to me it's very obvious that he's in like the glimpses that we get of him. He's
Mhm.
always looking for connection with her.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
she doesn't connect with any people at all. Like there's
No.
no people that she ever connects with in what we get from her in this story. But she loses herself in and connects with nature, which is
Mhm.
part of the dichotomy that, makes her a great protagonist for the story. I think most people who had one or the other as their friend and was watching this relationship, that would be like, what are you doing? Like, get out of
Yeah.
this relationship.
Yes.
I don't know, man. I don't know why people get married. And I don't know why. I think like for her, it's clear that the husband is just one motivation to go to
Mhm.
Area X, right?
Yeah.
But afterwards, I think once she's in Area X and she realizes she's not able to leave, she's like, well,
Mhm.
might as well go to the coast and
Yeah, may as
go
well,
where
I
he
guess.
went.
Like, so in the movie, they're more like picture perfect in love?
Yes, but they also add this weird subplot where she cheats on him.
Oh, what?
Yeah, there's like this subplot where she cheats on him before he leaves for Area X, and
Mhm.
there's like this implicit message of like he knows that she cheated on him, and so
Oh.
when he leaves to go to Area X, he's like very cold and everything.
Mhm.
She's a completely different character in the movie than in the book. She doesn't have that like cold detachedness that she has in the book.
Mhm.
And yeah, the relationship between her and her husband is a lot more lovey-dovey because they need that, I think, for the movie, because the only motivation for her going into Area X is to since we're now in spoiler territory, so at the beginning of the book, he's already dead of cancer, right?
Yeah.
It's like he's come back and he gets taken by the Southern Reach and then he dies of cancer. In the
Yeah.
movie, first off, in the movie, he doesn't die at all.
Oh, shit, what?
Well, okay, he dies, but his copy doesn't die,
Oh, yeah, okay,
right?
gotcha.
Because we know in the book that it's a copy that came out and it's not him.
Yeah.
Uh, in the movie, he dies, but you also see him die, but
Oh.
his copy doesn't die of cancer when he comes out. Like he comes out and he
Mhm.
has like his organs are failing and everything, and she
Mhm.
goes into Area X to like figure out what happened to him. But then
Mhm.
at the end of the movie, he's fine,
Oh, weird.
because one of the biggest differences between the movie and the book is that at the end of the movie, she blows up Area X
Oh, does she? Holy shit. That's
because
crazy.
she goes into the lighthouse and the lighthouse and the tower are like squished into one location.
Okay.
She finds the crawler. The crawler makes a copy of her, and she has like
Mhm.
a fight with a copy, and then triggers like a white phosphorus grenade
Okay.
that burns the copy, burns the crawler, and then starts burning all of Area X.
Oh, yeah, definitely a loose end tied if you're gonna
And
burn the
then
whole
and
place.
and that seems to reverse whatever was wrong with the copy of her husband, and so he
Oh.
stops dying. And then at the end, him and her hug, and he's got like a shimmer in his eyes because he's the copy, and then she has a similar shimmer in his eyes, where you're like,
Oh.
she's not a copy because she killed the copy, but she might still essentially be a copy because the thing is in her and has changed her.
Right.
Very different, very different.
Fascinating. I wanted to also talk about the final confrontation with the surveyor, like
Yeah,
probably the most frustrating part for me, because we had had that satisfying like back and forth Q&A between the biologist and the psychologist. I wanted the surveyor to also have closure with those answers, but they just were like, "Ah, I don't trust you. I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to shoot you." And
yeah.
I wish they would have had that conversation so badly. But they didn't.
I don't think it was possible because she was actively changing with her brightness,
Yeah.
and the surveyor was already so far gone, paranoia and trust wise.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a universe where they could have had any conversation, because the surveyor finally had something to fight, right? Remember, like she needed something
Yeah.
to fight, like a
Mhm.
direct thing to do. And then
Yeah.
when the biologist shows back up and she's got the brightness and she's fucking weird, for the
Yeah.
surveyor, it's like, okay, cool, I got something to kill now.
Yeah, I have a target. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, like, it makes more sense the way it laid out, but I kind of like the surveyor was kind of out on her own, like mentally a little bit with the
Hmm.
paranoia, and I don't know, she was kind of like adrift on a raft. Like as yeehaw shoot a gun as she was, I kind of felt for her in a way, and I
Yeah.
wanted her to like get some answers. But yeah, she just got shot dead.
Yeah, well,
Poor
especially
girl.
because when the psychologist leaves, she's left without a rudder, right? Because up to that
Yeah.
point, she's so conditioned with the hypnosis and everything
Yes,
that there's like
true.
this big hole left after the psychologist leaves to the lighthouse.
Yeah. Kind of the saddest arc. I don't know, like the psychologist
Anthropologist
didn't,
got it pretty bad.
but she at least got like quickly. She didn't have like as much like mental anguish and turmoil.
We don't
Like she
know.
just,
We don't see her die. We just see her after she's dead.
yeah, I guess that's true. But like I feel like any of the panic and immediate "I'm gonna die" would have been condensed into like the moment where she got by the crawler. But
Maybe
the,
so.
and the psychologist knew a bit more of what she was signing up for.
Yeah.
But speaking of what ifs, is there anything that you wish you could have read more about, or anything you wish Vandermeer could have expanded on in that book?
No, because I've read the whole series. And
Yeah,
I think
true.
that's what's really important is you can read Annihilation as like a self-contained story, but
Mhm,
there are so many unanswered questions, which is kind of part of
mhm,
the theme of Area X.
mhm.
But it is a much more satisfying experience when you read the whole series, even
Yeah.
the fourth book.
I was also gonna ask, how you would sell the rest of the series to somebody who just read the first, but I think maybe that also goes back to the if you thought there were things unanswered.
It's if you thought there were things unanswered, because book two is more about the Southern Reach, like the agency that sends the expeditions.
Oh, okay.
So, and there's a big theme in the series of the agency also just being completely fucked through the hypnosis, through the lies and everything. The humans in the story make the known unknown on purpose,
Right.
right? They go out of their way to obfuscate the history of the expeditions. They go out of their way to like hide what they would normally be able to see. And then when
Mhm.
you read book two and book three, especially, there's a lot more of that, a lot more of how the Southern Reach hides a whole bunch of things and how they manipulate things and how different people in the agency are connected to Area X in one way or another. Book two is definitely like a change of pace from book
Mhm.
one for that reason, but you kind of go on the other side of the barrier, right? And you learn different things about the Southern Reach. And then
Yeah.
book three is kind of the two. Like there's a lot of greater Area X stuff and a lot of great Southern Reach stuff. Yeah, I would sell it as like if you enjoyed that world and that universe, and then the atmosphere of like nobody knows anything, everybody's paranoid and everything. Like
Mhm.
the rest of the books is more of that, but it fills in a lot of the fog of war, if you will, around what you
Mhm.
already know about Area X.
I love that. I'm gonna have to get into it. And where can people like follow and engage with you on the internet?
Um, if you want cringe political takes, you can find me on X as at alleged writer. If you want occasional pictures of the woods and of Warhammer miniatures, it's alleged writer on Instagram.
Mhm.
I think I'm also alleged writer on Facebook. Yeah, those are the main places where I am when I come out of my cave and talk at people.
Great. And I think I'll also probably plug your because you'll be back to Substack eventually.
Eventually, when
And your Substack is so good. So I'm gonna link it. I'm gonna link Nick's Substack as well. And you can check out Fate's Conscripts. It's on Amazon. You can get it and read it and enjoy it. I'll put that link in the description as well. And thank you so much, Nick, for the yap over time.
yeah, thank you. It was great to yap with you about one of my favorite books.
Great. Yeah, I was happy to read it. And check out Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. If you haven't, and if you'd like to, you won't regret it. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Ah.